Good evening and welcome back to another episode of Since I Was Young, the Heart of Midlothian podcast, bringing you weekly content on all things Heart of Midlothian. I am delighted once again this evening to be joined by John. This evening we will be touching on the previous two fixtures in the Neil Critchley reign at Hearts, which began, obviously, in our last episode we discussed the St Mirren result, which has followed. Since then we have had a European tie against Omonia Nicosia, followed by just the small matter of an Edinburgh Derby that took place on the weekend just past there. So we'll be giving you our thoughts on both those games, as well as a look ahead to what is to come on Wednesday evening, time of recording, that is tomorrow evening. We face Kilmarnock at Tynecastle, and then the tricky prospect on the weekend of an away trip to face St Johnstone. So that's going to be your content for this evening. Before we get dived in, as always, guys, you can find all of our social links in the description. Please do head across to our social channels and drop your feedback. Let us know what you think of podcast episodes, and let us know if there's anything that we've not spoken about that you'd like us to talk about in the future, because that's how we learn what we want to talk about weekly. So yeah, as I say, all our links are down in the description. While you're down there, please consider subscribing to the YouTube channel, as well as giving us a follow on Spotify and all the usual places where you can find your podcast fixes. But yes, with the formalities out of the way, John, as I say, thank you once again for joining me this evening. How are you getting on?
Doing well, mate. It's always my pleasure. I have a piece of feedback though for you. Who's this long-haired hippie Ouija prick that you've got on the show every week, and when is Ewan coming back?
Well, I mean, do you know, it's not the first time I've heard that feedback.
I'm sure it's not.
I am, of course, joking. Your presence is always appreciated, sir.
Yeah.
As far as Ewan's
it's good to be back on, man.
fantastic.
It's good to be
Great
back
to have
on.
you.
Yeah.
As far as Ewan's whereabouts, he was last seen polishing the statue of Andy Halliday in the plaza, so he's as yet not
Finished,
left
yes.
it. But no, I'll certainly pass that on to him, and hopefully he'll be back with us in the not too distant future. But as I say, always nice to have you on. But yeah, like I say, we spoke previously about the St Mirren tie when you were on with me last week, and how impressive that was. And we kind of briefly touched on the second match day of the Europa Conference League, so we might as well just dive straight into that. We took on Omonia Nicosia at Tynecastle, and I think I was pretty confident, but maybe a little bit of maybe optimistic, as is my usual nature in these sorts of games. And optimism is my usual go-to when it comes to Hearts, to be honest. Sometimes blind optimism based off of previous events, but yeah, I felt we had a really, really realistic chance of getting a result against Omonia Nicosia if we played as well as we did against St Mirren in that game that you and I obviously witnessed, that opened the Neil Critchley era at Hearts. But I will say, I wasn't expecting us to be as good as we were against Omonia Nicosia. I don't know what you thought, but we came out the traps incredibly quickly, which appears to be a bit of a trademark of the Neil Critchley era, and I coined it the Gorgie Gegenpress has arrived at Tynecastle. How long it'll last, I don't quite know, but maybe Critchley is learning from his previous employment under Jurgen Klopp at Liverpool. You know, that would be nice. But yeah, I was pleasantly surprised about the start that we made against Omonia Nicosia. What were your thoughts? And even, you know, if you've got anything on the lineups, etc., that jumped out at you, feel free to give me your feedback.
I was absolutely thrilled by the start. Certainly, I think I actually mentioned on the previous episode that I did expect there would be several changes to the lineup. I was quite surprised to see Craig Gordon start after the kind of head knock that he took the Saturday before in the St Mirren game. As you know, I almost ended up in a psychiatric hospital overnight after witnessing that. I've been known as a bit of a Craig Gordon enjoyer in my life. But yeah, early barrage, you know, we were pretty much out of sight within 25 minutes. It only took 7 minutes for Hearts to dispatch of Omonia Nicosia this past midweek. 16 minutes, a fantastic finish by your boy Florestinho, who I just want to highlight is just actually, I was going to ask you a question. I was going to question you on him, and I'm going to do it right now, just out of the blocks. Where among Hearts' historical European performers would you say Forrest sits at this point? Because I feel like he has been, the last two seasons, our most consistent player in Europe. He's the guy that you can rely on to step up in those big games. Him probably along with Devlin, but Forrestinho is a guy who doesn't get a start every week in the league. But my God, does he turn it on in Europe?
Oh, he definitely does. I think you're right. I think Forrest is one of those players that when he's not on it, he's a very easy target for fans to kind of have a go at him
Yeah.
when he's maybe not giving it 100% or he's not quite at the races. Because he's an easy target for people to slaughter because he's a squad player. He's a dependable squad player, the sort of player that teams need to have, especially teams that are playing 3 games a week. Um, but yeah, I take quite a lot of flack for my love affair with Alan Forrest. But it is for the pure and simple fact, not just because he's called Alan, but it's that does have a part to play in it. But I think like you, I think I enjoy a dependable player, and I think in Europe in these sorts of games you need that. You do need somebody that you just know what you're going to get. He's going to give you a solid 6, 7 out of 10 performance every week. And you're right to say his ability in sort of the bigger games in the European fixtures over the last couple of years has, I probably think, been sort of underappreciated, I would say. But like I say, he's the perfect player that you want for games when you're playing 3 games a week. And the Critchley system appears to be quite highly, high intensity, high pressing football. So we're going to need a squad to be able to play like that. And I think, it's like when Michael Smith was at right back. Mr. Reliable came in, you knew what you'd get, and he did the job. Whatever you asked him to do, he did the job. And I think Alan Forrest is similar in that sense. But yeah, his goal that he took against Omonia Nicosia was fantastic. Again, it was one of those instant control, and he knew exactly what he wanted to do with it. I think they spoke to him
Yeah.
after the game on TNT Sport, and he spoke about it, and he says, I saw the ball coming to me, and I knew there and then I knew what I was going to do. It might have ended up in the stand or it might have ended up in the back of the net, but at least he knew what he was going to do before the ball reached him, and I think that helped him massively to put the ball away. But yeah, listen, I like you are a Craig Gordon enjoyer. I'm very much an Alan Forrest enjoyer, and it'll be a sad day when he's not at Hearts anymore. But I think
Yeah.
he's a player that has grown, I think, on me. And I think, when he arrived from Livingston, I think it seems to be a path that we kind of follow quite often with players arriving from them. And there was a lot of questions about will he be able to step up from that to our level. And it maybe took him a bit of time to kind of find his role, find his place, but I think he's certainly found it now. And I think under Critchley, with, as I say, with the system that he wants to play, he's going to need a squad of players that he knows he can turn to when he's looking to make a change, turn to the bench and say, right, you can go on and do something. And obviously, we'll touch on the Edinburgh Derby later, but you could point at that as well, as another occasion when a player comes off the bench and makes a big difference. But yeah, I listen. I love Alan Forrest. I've not got a bad word to say about him. And if anybody does, well, I'll give you square goes in the plaza because he's my boy, and I'll defend him constantly.
Out by the new Andy Halliday statue that Ewan just finished.
Absolutely, I'll meet you under the
Yeah.
statue.
Uh, to your point about the finish, and it was a very well taken finish. I felt that both that and the second goal by Blair Spittle, which was a fantastic first time drive, those two I think are emblematic of the change in this team since Critchley's been in. Potentially even before that, when Fox was kind of steadying the ship. The decision making, the killer instinct seems to be back for a lot of these boys. It comes with confidence, clearly. There is
Yeah,
a confidence about the front four that we have seen such a lack of. They've been essentially bereft of confidence up front all season until these last couple of weeks. But you see that instant decision by Alan Forrest, and he said so in his comments after. I knew what I was going to do. Um,
yeah,
Blair Spittle, not a split second's hesitation. That ball is cut into him, smashes it 2-0. And you're seeing that, and it's a great thing to see. Even Shankland, although he is still struggling for goals, you're seeing him take shots that you would expect Lawrence Shankland to take. He's relying less on running deep to support. He's relying less on flick-ons to other people around him. Fabiano made an absolutely superb save from a lovely low curled drive by Shankland as well. Um, and he had a chance or two that he could have potentially put away in the derby as well, but like it just isn't falling for him at the moment. Um, so yeah, that for me is one of the key aspects is just the killer instinct and the fact that these guys are wanting to take a shot now, whereas for the first several weeks of the season, it just felt like they were allergic to it. Um,
yeah.
in terms of the overall performance, just to wrap up my thoughts on Nicosia, it was kind of I mentioned out of sight earlier. I felt like it was almost a case of out of sight, out of breath, because they did kind of die toward the end of the first half, and the second half was a lot scrappier. I'll take it. As like I said before, it's reminiscent of a certain manager we had in 2005-06 that um, that worked out okay. So if we can do that and we can stay in front of teams, then I'm more than happy with that style of football. Um, Never a danger of them scoring, it felt like either. Very solid at the back. And considering our
Yeah,
two main frailties in the earlier part of the season were an inability to finish and an inability to keep to keep the ball out of the back of our own net. Just a fantastic and complete performance overall and a well deserved 3 points, which makes it 6 out of 6. 2 wins from
yeah,
two in the Europa Conference League. You can't grumble at that. And like
no,
you've been
definitely.
saying previously, I saw this in the previous one as a free hit. And if we continue to just treat it that way, and we can potentially keep building confidence by getting results or putting in good performances midweek that stand us in good stead for the league campaign, the only thing you need to watch out for is fatigue and
Yeah.
the effect that that might have on the legs, because I do feel that that came into play on Sunday.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. Well, we'll touch on that kind of as we go along. But in terms of the Nicosia game, I don't really have much to add. Aside from you mentioned a couple of players in terms of Forrest and Devlin. I wanted to just give a shout out to Malachi Boateng, a man whose name I've been mispronouncing for weeks until I was corrected by your good self and a few others. Um, he had, and I remember watching Benny when he made his debut for Hearts, and I was thinking, what a player we've got here. The way he takes the ball in, the way he recovers it, the way he turns it round and plays it forward. It's almost like Boateng is a clone of Benny, and I never thought we'd be able to say that because Benny obviously had his injury worries and he had his time out and all the rest of it. And the midfield coped in his absence. It changed, but it certainly coped in his absence in a different way. But I think Boateng has come in and just kind of been such a steady player. He looks at home at that level. And I know Omonia Nicosia were no great shakes, let's be honest. They were pretty average at best. But again, like we said after St Mirren, we made them look that way with the way that we played. And I think
100%.
that's kind of echoed what Critchley said after the game when he spoke about we're at home, this is our pitch, this is our rules, you play our game and we're coming after you. When I heard that quote, I was like, yes, that's what Tynecastle should be. And that's what we want to make Tynecastle a place that teams don't want to come and play because they know they're going to get run all over. And I think Boateng was a massive, massive kind of symbol of that against the Omonia Nicosia. There was a moment, I think it was in the second half, it might have been the first, where he does the Benny sort of trademark turn where he takes the ball in and spins away
Ah,
from his man and
yes,
he's through. And I'm thinking,
yes.
I was watching that game and I'm thinking, was that Benny that's just done that? And I'm like, no, it was Boateng. And Dev, Devlin was
Eddie
brilliant as
would
well.
have
But
to hit a lot of steroids to get to that size, mate.
true, true. But even Devlin next to him was really solid as well. So I have to give shouts to him and
Brilliant.
also young Adam Forrester.
Oh yeah.
In as
Hmm.
much as Omonia Nicosia didn't really offer very much, I thought their sort of main man was a winger called Willie Semedo that played down Adam Forrester's side. And Forrester did very, very well defensively. He just did his jobs. He got forward well. He kept the ball well. He moved it well.
Mhm.
And for a player that's only made 5 appearances or 5 senior appearances, he looks like a very dependable option. And I think the fact that Critchley is obviously continuing to use him shows that, which is a massive, massive feather in his cap as well for a guy that's been promoted from the B team by Liam Fox. And obviously, I think maybe having Liam Fox on the dugout maybe helps Forrester as well because it's he was his captain for the B team, so it's a case of you know what I can do, and there's a dependability there and a player that they know. Again, like I said about Forrest, a player that they know if they need to use him, it's not going to be an issue. But no, in terms of the Nicosia game, we'll kind of leave it there. But the second half, as you say, was much more scrappy, and I think there was much more a case of kind of game management there. Craig Gordon rushing off his line
Effective
because he
game
had nothing.
management.
Oh, very much so,
Yeah,
very much so. And
yeah.
even from the bench, the changes that were made as well during the game helped because you could tell there was an element of again that rotation side of things. And I'll touch on the Critchley rotation sort of situation as we go, but what I like about what I've seen so far is that the system doesn't change. It's just personnel that change. We made a slight tactical switch for the game against Omonia Nicosia. We played a 4-2-3-1 instead of that 4-4-2 that we saw against St Mirren, but it operated in a similar way to that system. And
Mhm.
it was positive in that sense. And we're not seeing wholesale shape and system changes and
Yeah.
personnel changes like we saw under Naismith. And it almost feels like Naismith, all the things that Naismith did wrong at the start of the season, Critchley, obviously, like you touched on last week, Critchley spent the last few weeks watching every Hearts game this season. Critchley's probably looked at that and went, these players just need this to be kept simple. It doesn't need to be overcomplicated. And even
Yeah.
like I've noticed it in interviews that the players have been doing after the games. They did it after St Mirren. They've done it after the Nicosia game. They've spoke about the manager and they've said he's come in and just kept it simple. He's
You
simplified
took the words out
things.
of my mouth. Yeah, I was going
And
to make that
you
point exactly.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and you're talking about players being confident. It bleeds from that because they know what they're doing. They know when they go into training
Hmm.
what shape we're playing. We know where we're supposed to be, and players can grow in that, and it makes it easier for them to enjoy their football.
Yeah.
But yeah,
It's
I
given them a
think
chance as well to focus on the battles rather than
yes,
having to work through a new system every week in training. Gives them a chance to
completely,
look at the smaller battles that they're going to have to play out on the pitch. Blair
completely.
Spittle, I think, is the guy who said it. I think it was after the game. It was either before or after the Nicosia game.
Mm-hmm.
And he seems to be one of the guys, the chief guys, that is like receiving the dividends from it. Not only the fact that
Yeah,
he's getting more consistent game time in his own in a more natural position where he's getting forward, but just the simplicity of you drive forward and be on the edge of the box for the ball coming is
yeah.
working wonders.
Yeah, completely. And obviously, the Blair Spittle goal was his third goal in 3 games for him, which is obviously a big plus. I think I remember seeing a
Yeah.
stat. It's the first time he scored in 3 games in a row since 2017 or something along the lines of that. So he is clearly reaping the rewards of that. And it is, football, and we've said this a few times, football is a very simple game. We've said that on this podcast plenty of times. If you try and overcomplicate it, especially with a quality of player that's maybe not capable of doing what a Pep Guardiola Man City side wants to do, or we have to embrace the quality that we have and keep it simple so that they can play to the best of their ability. If, as Critchley grows in the team and if things improve and if he brings his own players in, he might want to change something, but the fundamentals have to be the same. The high press, the quick getting after the ball. And like I say, that quote that he gave after the game will stick with me for the time that Critchley is at Hearts, that we're at home, this is our pitch, this is our rules, you play our game and we're coming after you. I'm like that. That's a tagline for a Critchley ball that is hopefully developing in front of us. As I say, the Gorgie Gegenpress, I'm coining it before anybody else does. But
Although I do have to take slight umbrage to the use of the name Critchley ball because somebody else came up with that system first, Alan, and it was me. That's
it
Michaela
was you.
ball that we're playing. You've
I
seen
was
my
waiting
football
on that.
manager tactics.
was Has Critchley been on the phone to you by any chance?
He called me Proto Critch.
But no, it's the result against Omonia Nicosia saw us, as you said, 2 wins from 2 in the Conference League,
Yeah.
in a position that is a fantastic position to be in. We've banked a pretty decent chunk of prize money already just off the back of 2 wins in that competition, which is huge. That helps. It all adds to the budget, so it all adds to the coffers, and it helps us improve down the line. I'm going to hesitate to say we've got 1 foot in the knockout phase of the Conference League because we're Hearts. We've seen this story before. When we start
Yeah.
building ourselves up for a
Yeah.
accidental fall in the end, but to have a
We
hundred
also, I
percent
think,
record,
I also don't think we've faced the best teams that we're going to face yet.
yeah,
So it is probably very important to always maintain that in the back of our heads of like, yeah, it's great to win 2 out of 2, but it's not the two that we would have not been expected to get anything from. So it's
yeah,
like, uh, although, yeah,
yeah. No,
brilliant
I'm
start, a
with
dream
you.
start, really.
Oh, completely. I'm with you there. And Critchley continues to talk about that when they speak to him. He says, it's been great. We've done really well to begin with. And he's making it very much known that, we've not had a lot of time, obviously, due to the number of games in a short period of time. He's not really had
Yeah,
a
five
great deal of
games.
time to
Is
implement
it
what he
five or
wants to
eight
do.
games in 15 days?
Yeah, it's 5. Well, it'll be 5 and 15. Yeah. And it is,
Yeah,
it's a lot to come into a new club. And that's why the keeping it simple approach is obviously working, and the players, like we say, are relishing it. But yeah, like I say, I'm not going to jump the gun and say that we've qualified, but seeing us up in the top 8 is a really, really nice sight to see at the moment. But in terms of the Omonia Nicosia game, I think that kind of wraps it up. In terms of the game itself and what it means, we'll see what happens. Obviously, up next we have Heidenheim at Tynecastle at the start of November. So there's that game to look forward to. Heidenheim, a top flight German side. So again, they'll pose a different threat, and I'm sure Critchley will be all too aware of that. But it's a very good start to life in the Conference League. And like I say, money in the bank is a big, big plus. But yes, we then obviously went on to arguably, I think one of those games that, when Critchley took the job, he was probably looking at the Edinburgh Derby and going, that's the game. That's the game I can make my mark. That's the game that fans that are perhaps a little bit skeptical about my appointment, that's the game that I need to be able to say, right, this is it. I'm here. And we know Hearts' record at Easter Road is a positive one. I said last week when we spoke about it briefly that I was confident in us and in our players, and if we turned up and played our game, we can win it. Obviously, it unfolded in a slightly different way, but what were your thoughts when you saw even the lineup for the derby? And what were your thoughts kind of going into the game? Did you feel as confident as I did? I wasn't overconfident, but like I say, we've seen that story many a time.
Run up to the derby, I felt pretty confident. On the day, however, I think I was thinking back to Nicosia and the fact that it had only been a couple of days since that game, and I was like, I really hope that it's like Critchley has mentioned, you have to balance like a settled squad with squad management. But with how intense the press is under this new system, and it is a new system, so they're not going to be pelting it like 100% and smashing this new system. They can't do it for
Mm-hmm.
90 minutes, and we've seen that. And I was kind of concerned that after two games in the space of 5 days, that we would potentially run out of legs and fatigue would be a bigger factor. And I feel like that was the case. I felt that it was a very physical game, particularly the first half. I was actually kind of enjoying the physicality of it. Like it was a good old fashioned derby, but that's going to take a toll on a team that's already quite tired. And I feel like that certainly bore out over the course of the first 45 minutes, particularly, um, which of course led to Hibs taking the lead.
Yeah,
I felt that the fact of the matter was that we had a lot of chances to create chances, but we weren't creating enough chances off the back of that. We spent quite a lot of time and had the vast majority of the ball, and we spent a lot of that time in the kind of middle part of the park and in the sort of first half of the Hibs half, essentially.
yeah,
We had so many chances to kind of try and break them down, but it just felt like that final ball wasn't there. And while earlier in the season the final ball wasn't there for an entirely different reason, I just felt like we weren't getting the right guys onto the end of the through ball, the pass, the cross, and Hibs were able to kind of like play us out of the game because we were just. I felt like it was fatigue. I felt like the front four were unable to keep up the intensity from the previous two games. With that being said, at no point did I feel like we were overwhelmed by Hibs. I felt like Hibs like sort of pissed away an opportunity to do something pretty special that day,
yeah,
based on how tired and lagged it felt like the Hearts players were. So overall, I'll take a point, to be honest. I'll certainly take 7 points from nine over the last three games with two clean sheets, 2 wins and two clean sheets, and a point at Easter Road. I'll have that, thanks. Like it sets us up for the coming months pretty well. It's unfortunate we weren't able to win it because Shankland had a fantastic chance or two to put the ball away, and he just wasn't able to do it. Um,
yeah,
I'm kind of feeling for him, to be honest, because it's got to be so frustrating. He's getting in good positions. He's working so hard in support. He's become even more of a complete player. I feel like in a lot of ways,
yeah,
but that
yeah,
finishing product just isn't there for him at the moment. It's going to come. It did last year, and it took until about this time, maybe even a wee bit later last year, for him to really start going. And when he does, I don't feel like I'm not particularly worried. I feel like when he starts scoring, he won't stop.
Yeah, well,
But it's a
here's
confidence
hoping.
thing, isn't it? It's a confidence thing. He needs to get his confidence back in front of goal. And hopefully that example of Forrest, of Spittle, will start to sort of bleed into his performances as well, and he'll start to get that snappy decision making, that killer instinct back.
Yeah,
Like you mentioned on the last podcast as well, Vargas and Shankland also have to work together, and
yeah,
learn to work together, and they're a duo now, and they need to sort of build that too. It's something that doesn't happen overnight. We've seen it so
no,
many times where two great strikers don't necessarily make for a great striker partnership. We need to give them the time they need to develop that chemistry together. Um, but
that's
yeah,
fair.
it felt
That's
like
fair.
it felt like a pretty even game, physical game. Hearts certainly were no at no point did we play awful football.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
happy with that.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, the thing, like, obviously you've kind of summed up your Derby thoughts in a roundabout way there, just in general. But I think we know that these games are never decided by the quality of the game, and a lot of people that have been in touch with me that are neutrals have said, oh God, a game of football almost broke out there, and things like that. And you're like, yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
derbies through the years have been very, very rarely full of quality from both sides. You don't tend to get both sides turning up on the day and putting in that level of performance. But I thought, derbies in general are always about who wants it more and who's more up for the scrap and who's more up for the fight in terms of the emotional side of it, and controlling that emotional side of it tends to be the more challenging aspect of a derby. Whether you're the home side or the away side, that tends to be the way that it goes. Um, I'm not going to give any coverage to the Hibs fans that threw stuff at James Penrice, other than to say you're absolute scumbag, lowest of the low. And I know Hibs fans that are good friends of mine, and we have banter and we rib each other on a derby day, but it's all kind of in fun and games and in jest. But each of them have messaged me saying, this is an individual that's done this, and it's just fucking stupid. And I mean, there've been Hearts fans that have done the same in instances in games at Tynecastle. So other than that, I won't give it any coverage. I thought Ryan McGowan was very good in the coverage and basically said it's an idiot that doesn't represent the entire fan base for either side when these things happen, and they kind of just left it at that. So that's as much as I'll say on it. But if you feel the need to go to a game of football and throw things at an opposition player, you should probably have a look at yourself, to be
yeah.
honest. But
That's what the
in
referee is there for.
well, yeah, I suppose. But in terms of the quality on the pitch, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't condone throwing it at the ref either, John. I don't know what you're insinuating there. Depends who the ref is.
Exactly. No,
But
to me,
yeah,
for the absence of any doubt, I'm joking. No, there's no
I know.
there's no place for any of that. The one thing I did enjoy though was Penrice's shithousing grin at the guy in response.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
was just like he had this look on his face of like, well, obviously I've gotten under your skin. Like
yeah, and
it's
but this is the thing, and this is kind of what I wanted to touch on more so. Like, obviously, you spoke about your thoughts on the game, and the mentality side of it is always something that
yeah,
fascinates me about these derbies. And I sent you the clip of the podcast with John Robertson and John Collins, the warm
that's
up,
right. Yeah.
and I loved it because they barely let John Collins have two words. I think they were just in awe of the fact that John Robertson was there, and they would rather just talk to
Hmm.
him. And to be honest, I don't blame them. But Robbo made some brilliant points, and obviously this was out before the game happened, and he basically said, and the bit that stuck with me was that mentality aspect, and he said, Hearts teams I was in, we didn't lose to Hibs. It was drummed into us that you don't lose those games, and you never know when you're out of it. You never know when you're beaten, because the Hibs fans' mentality rubs off on their players. Even if they're leading in a game with 5 minutes to go or 10 minutes to go, you always know you're going to have a chance because the Hibs fans get nervous because, oh, we've seen this
Yeah.
story before. It's coming, it's coming. And I'm paraphrasing what Robbo actually said, but he called it. He absolutely called it spot on. And I think it's something that, and as I say, I know quite a lot of Hibs fans, and I've spoken to them before the game, and they were all saying, if you don't take 3 or 4 off of us, it's not a good day for you, because the pressure was on David Gray massively, and understandably so. But like I said at the start of the episode, there was pressure on Critchley as well, because there are still obviously fans in our fan base that are critical of his appointment and wondering who is this guy? What's he bringing? And he's probably looked at that Edinburgh Derby as a game to go, right, if I've still got fans that are unsure about me being here, I can show that this is a game, this is an important game for them. I'll show them what we're able to do in that game. And I do think for large spells of the game, we were very much in that mold of keeping the ball, and we we pressed them back and we pinned them back in their own half on occasions. But this is something that I highlighted. I can't remember if it was last week or previously, but a lack of pace in this team is what cost us against Hibs for me. We just didn't have that little bit extra to open them up and really create something. And to be
Mm.
fair to Hibs, they had the better chances during the game, like you touched on. And obviously, when they scored their goal as well, it was one of those goals that's avoidable, and that's what irritates me. It was a free kick that Devlin gave away, and it's an avoidable incident. It shouldn't have led to a goal. You know, Gordon gets caught out. Unfortunately, the ball just lands at the Hibs boys' feet and he puts it away. And it's frustrating to lose a goal like that. And I think Critchley sort of said it as well. Like prior to the goal, we were actually looking quite good and we were looking in a bit of control. And when that goal comes against you, it's a bit like, oh well, you know, we've been on top, and you know we've lost a silly goal. We've seen it for Hearts this season already in a few games at the start of the season, mostly where when we go behind, you start thinking, ah well, that's this game done. But obviously, Easter Road, it's never done until it's finished, until the final whistle's blown. But I'm not even going to try and pronounce the Hibs striker's, the Hibs goal scorer's name, because I've tried at least four or five
Jurevich.
times. Oh, look at that. You see, John, that's why I have you here. That's why I have you here. If it was you and I, we'd be taking about a fortnight to try and figure it out. But yeah, I mean, between us, I'll say that. But yeah, like it was an unfortunate goal to give away at an unfortunate time. But I do think, you know, the balance of play, and David Gray said after the game that, you know, they should have won the game, they were the better side, etc., which of course he's going to come out and say that. They were in a lead. You know, they had a lead and they threw it away again. Hibs have this amazing ability this season to find ways to monumentally collapse in the last 5 to 10 minutes of football matches. Obviously, we witnessed it when we were leaving Tynecastle after the St Mirren tie to find out that they'd lost 3-2 to Dundee United from a 2-1 winning position. So
Yeah.
obviously, I
2-1
didn't.
going into stoppage time.
Well, that's it. I didn't. I unfortunately didn't get to watch the game live on the weekend, as I had another engagement. But when I saw the score come up of 1-0, I thought, right, okay. And then I looked at how the game was going and, like, obviously checked on the social medias of people that I trust to give me accurate information rather than, oh, we're fucking awful, this is horrendous, Critchley out, etc., etc. Um, which I didn't see, by the way. I'm saying that in jest. But I looked at the sort of the way the game was going and thought, right, maybe that is deserved for Hibs. Maybe they, you know, they have had the better chances. We seem to have had a lot of possession and not really done very much with it. But that then alludes to the lack of pace and the lack of being able to just change it, you know, and maybe inject a little bit extra. Which again, as I say, is something that I think that Critchley might look to deal with maybe in January or whenever. But we do have pacey players. We just don't have enough of them. I think that's the problem. And in that occasion, we didn't really have anybody that could unlock Hibs, unfortunately. But the response to going 1-0 down, I thought was fantastic. And I think that feeds into the John Robertson mentality comment, sort of saying,
Yeah.
we never know when we're beaten. And, you know, Critchley was asked during the week about the derby and what's he learned about it. And he said, you know, he was getting a lift into work from Gogsy the kit man, who was informing him about all things Edinburgh Derby, and he's done his homework and he knows how big a game it is and he understands. And because there could have been an element of that, you know, does this guy that's come up the road from down south, does he understand the magnitude of this game? Does he understand what it means? And I think, you know, if he didn't prior to kickoff, he certainly does now. Um, but he said after the game that he loved it and he enjoyed every minute of it. And, you know, I do think a point was fair. I want to obviously touch on the goal scorer. That's kind of where I'll move it on to. Young James Wilson came off the bench and got a goal right at the end. Well, almost at the end, pretty much. I love James Wilson. I do. I think everything about the lad is what you want from a Hearts player. And he's a 17-year-old who is living the dream right now. And I think it's one of those scenarios, obviously, when he got his chance under Naismith last season, sort of towards the end of the season, he got a few more minutes and he was obviously more involved. And you could see that this is a kid that wants to be at Hearts and wants to develop and wants to learn and is happy to do that. Obviously, there was a lot of whispers about interest from down south, and there was an element of it for me that I was sitting here thinking, this is just going to be another academy prospect that we see a fleeting glimpse of, and he's swiped away by English top flight side and never to be seen or heard of ever again. But the Stephen Naismith influence cannot be understated, as much as obviously Naismith is no longer at Hearts. The influence that he had on allowing James Wilson to get that game time and promoting him to the first team ahead of players like Mackenzie Kirk, who've since moved on, giving him that platform and saying, right, if you believe you're good enough for this first team setup and you're good enough to be in amongst it, I'm happy to give you that platform to do that. And it's really, really refreshing to see James Wilson go, yeah, do you know what? I'm going to take that platform. I'm not going to go. I'm going to stay here. I'm going to commit for the time being. How long we'll have him, I don't know. There was talk after the game. Critchley was asked about his contractual situation. Apparently, he's got a 12-month extension on the table that can be triggered at any point, and then obviously beyond that, they'll have to speak further down the line. So it wouldn't surprise me if the 12-month extension is triggered sooner rather than later, due to him obviously having 2 goals in 2 games now. But I just think he's got the perfect head on his shoulders for a young guy. Because to me, if I'm a young player coming through, and there's countless examples of players that break through onto the scene, get their big chance, take it, and then, as I said, they get swiped by an English club and you never hear from them again. James Wilson did an interview after the Hibs game and he openly spoke about it. He said, the reason I stayed at Hearts is because I want to play first team football. And that is not a route that a lot of young players take. Those were his words. So he knows the option was there for him to go and experience something else and probably earn 4 or 5 times as much as he's earned at Hearts, if not more than that, and play maybe in a better environment, maybe academy football down south, or with fancy facilities, etc. But he's put first team football at Hearts above all of that because he knows there is a route there for him. And I was very, very critical of the decision to sell Tagawa and not replace him. And I still am. I still feel like James Wilson is not enough to be the only other option. But James Wilson is justifying it to me occasionally when I see him do little things, and he's got an instinct of a goal scorer. And this is like, well, I'll lead on to the goal. Obviously, he got his goal against St Mirren by being in the right place at the right time to put that ball in the net. He does exactly the same thing against Hibs. He's in the right place at the right time. It's not a pretty goal, but he's there and he puts it away. And I loved his interview after the game where he said, I was dreaming about it last night. I wanted to score a better goal than that. I knew I'd come on and score, but I wanted a better one than that. And I
Mm-hmm.
love that. I'm like, this kid gets it. But
Yeah.
before I give you it back, the thing that impressed me even more than all of that was his celebration. He scores the goal, and rather than now, I don't know about you, but if I'm a 17-year-old laddie that's come off the bench in an Edinburgh Derby, scored at the away end in front of the Hearts fans, I would have been jumping in that stand with them. I would have been going absolutely tonto. He, again, it's testament to his mentality and it's testament to his temperament. He picks the ball up out the net and he's waving the players back to the halfway line. And I'm thinking, this kid wants to go on and win this game. This kid is not,
Yeah.
obviously he had a little celebration, he was buzzing about it. The fans were singing his name and all the rest of it. But he's picked the ball up as if to say, right, let's go and win it. Let's go and get another one. And I love that. And apparently, again, I'm making reference to the interview that he made after the game. He said, I wanted to go and win it. I wanted to go and get another one. But the older players told me to just slow it down a bit and calm down. And I'm thinking, yeah, okay, maybe there's a balance between the two things. But this kid just gets it. And for a guy that's been at Hearts since the age of 9, I look at him and I think, you are exactly where you should be right now. How long we'll have him for, I don't know. There could be a more attractive offer on the table for him sooner rather than later. But
Yeah.
I think what we have in James Wilson, and Neil Critchley said it as well, this is a young lad that's happy and eager to learn. And that is priceless. You know, he's not going to be a 20 goal a season striker this season, let's be honest. I don't even know if he'll be that in the future, but he gets it. He gets it. He is the sort of person that, as a Hearts fan, I watch him and I go, I'd love to be doing what he does. I'd be, like I say, if I scored a goal in an Edinburgh Derby to get my team a point, I'd be bouncing off the walls for weeks. Apparently, he went home after the game because he had PE homework he had to finish.
Yeah, yeah,
Which just, again, it just sums up the character of the lad, and it really, I mean, obviously he's one of our own, as the fans sang at full time, but
yeah.
I think he has very much endeared himself to fans if he hadn't already.
100%, man. Yeah, the level of maturity that James Wilson shows already at 17 years old, I think it's clearly a testament to his parents. Don't know anything about his home life, but whoever it is that's raising that boy is doing it right. A testament also to the Hearts youth setup from the academy through, the B team. He has such a great head on his shoulders for his age. He clearly has a lot of talent. Where that talent can take him, nobody can tell. The fact that he has already made a conscious decision that he wants to stay here and this to be his apprenticeship, rather than going down south to some fancy youth academy somewhere and earning massive wages, shows a patience and a determination to get it right. He doesn't want to be some could have been flop who is sitting counting his money while he's like, oh, I never really got to go anywhere though because I was in the academy for 6 years and then I broke my leg. He wants to play
Mm-hmm.
football every week at a top level, top flight level, and he's justifying that, like you say, like when he came in as the sort of vice Tagawa, it isn't exactly an overwhelmingly obvious comparison. It's like they're very different players. Tagawa certainly looked toward the end of last season like he was starting to come out of his shell a bit and that he could hopefully kick on this year and start to be a big piece. I think potentially his departure upset the apple cart quite a bit and was a part of why our front line struggled as much as it did early in the season. Um, but yeah, James Wilson now has 2 goals in the space of a week. One, his first ever goal, and the second one, an equaliser with less than 5 minutes left in an Edinburgh Derby.
Yeah.
It's the stuff dreams are made of. He's probably making
Oh,
Robbo proud
completely.
with the type of goals he's scoring as well. He's got that poacher's mentality of get it in the back of the net. Like
Yeah.
you say, yeah, he's dreaming about postage stamps and tele goals, but whatever it takes to get that ball in the net, he's willing to do. So it shows his work ethic, it shows his maturity, and it shows his loyalty as well. And that loyalty hopefully will be repaid with a bit more playing time. And what I think is most wonderful right now is to see 2 young Scottish players come through the youth system and become a fixture in the first team. It's something that we all need so much more of. Like if the Scotland national setup is ever to like get off its arse, we need to be developing young Scottish players, and we want the best Scottish players to be playing in Scotland for as long as possible.
Completely.
So it's great to see. It really is great to
Yeah.
see. And like you say,
Yeah.
the celebration, again, it just shows maturity and it shows a determination that he had to, no, a point's not enough against them. We want to win this. And that again will rub off on Critchley. He's like you say, if he didn't know what that game means before the game, he certainly does now. Because he'll be
Yeah.
listening to Wilson's comments and saying, yeah, he gets it.
Yeah.
And I think I get it.
Yeah. I think that's the thing. I think the fact that Critchley has turned to him ahead of a Liam Boyce kind of shows where they both are in the pecking order. Because obviously Liam Boyce has the experience, and people will critique me for saying this, but he does still have some ability. He's not finished, but there is an element of we've got to look at what comes next, and I think James Wilson is that rather than Liam Boyce. Obviously, Boyce's contract's up at the end of the season, so there'll be a decision to be made there. And Critchley is clearly looking at James Wilson and going, well, whenever I've put him on, like I said earlier about Alan Forrest, whenever I've put him on the pitch and told him to do something, he's delivered. And that is a massive, massive thing for a new manager to know who he can rely on and who he can trust to carry out what he wants them
Yep.
to do. One other man that I haven't even spoken about, and I'm sure you'll have much more to say on him than I do, is the man at the opposite end of the field, the absolute hero that is Craig Gordon. The stat that
Yep.
I sent to you just after the derby, in fact, was when James Wilson was born, Craig Gordon had already had 166 appearances for Hearts and won
And
19
19
Scotland
Scotland
caps.
caps. Yeah.
And when they were standing next to each other doing the interview on Sky, it actually dawned on me that Craig Gordon is old enough to be James Wilson's granddad, not just his dad. So that
Yeah.
in itself was a baffling
I mean,
concept to me.
some rather inappropriate relationships that had been had. Let's clarify. He's not quite that old, but yeah, he
Close
could
enough.
biologically have been his grandfather.
Yeah,
Um,
it's
I mean, I
crazy.
mentioned, yeah, I mean, I mentioned to you earlier, like we grew up watching Craig Gordon, and he is 5 years older than I am. That's completely nuts. Like it's just
Is
crazy how long he has been around.
and
Um,
he kept us in the game as well at points as well. I have to say, like we spoke about it
absolutely,
earlier.
yeah,
We spoke about
yeah.
the
He was,
derby earlier, and we spoke about the game as it went on. And Hibs did have
yeah,
chances, and Gordon pulled off some fantastic saves.
yeah.
Obviously,
Even
Wilson.
when they got their goal, like the looping header that he palmed into the bar, him saving that was spectacular. I mean, I
Yeah,
feel like there was a bit of a struggle in the box, a bit of a stramash, as a certain Mr. Dunsire would call it. I feel that Blair Spittle was kind of culpable on the goal because Blair Spittle was behind the goal line for most of that. Like if he had
yeah,
just come forward, he could have potentially blocked it off, but he just kind of stood there in the back of the net. Like I don't know why you're back there, mate. You can't stop anything from there.
it was
Um,
an odd one. It
but
was an
yeah,
odd one.
Craig Gordon is turning back the years and is putting in some fantastic performances again, and it is a delight to see. After everything he's been through, like whether it be the original knee injury, I think he broke either one or both of his arms when he was at Celtic, and then the massive knee injury when he was about to turn 40. Um, and here he is, just putting in performance after performance, and
Yeah,
he's playing for Scotland again. You know, it's just it's amazing to see. He
it
is
really
for
is.
me. I've said before, for me, he is Hearts' greatest ever.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm with you on that. But with that, we'll kind of wrap up the Hibs game there. Obviously, there were a few chances for us between the James Wilson goal and the full time whistle to try and get that second goal, but sadly, it wasn't to come. And a point was shared in the Edinburgh Derby, which hilariously keeps Hibs bottom of the table and keeps us above them, despite our worst start to a
Yeah,
Premier League season ever.
it
Hibs,
makes their chance of can you hear the Jambos sing quite hilarious. You know, after
it
they took the
does.
lead, they were like, ah ha ha, yes, and then we
Yeah.
equalise and keep them right where they are, where they belong, which is
Yeah, but you
bottom.
know, like we say, the mentality aspect, I guarantee you, every single Hibs fan was singing that song through gritted teeth, knowing that
Of
something was
course,
going to happen. And
yeah,
obviously, young James
because they
Wilson
know that
steps
John
up.
Robertson's absolutely right. Like
Absolutely. Yeah,
Robertson, if I can just actually circle back to the Robertson interview before we move on, before I forget,
of course.
the
Of
one
course.
thing that shocked me to my core was the question: would you rather have 22 in a row, or would you rather have played in the 5-1 final? And he chose 22 in a row. I was baffled by that. I would give my left testicle to be on that team and to have lifted that cup that day.
Well,
It is
the fact
crazy
is
to me
on
that
that.
anybody would rather.
To be fair, sorry to jump in there. To be fair,
Yeah.
we could have given John Robertson his boots back in 2012 and he went on the pitch at the age he was, and he probably would have bagged a goal in that game as bad as Hibs were
Yeah.
that day. So, but yeah,
Just
it's
bring him on for the last 20 minutes. Wouldn't I had to do anything.
probably score a hat trick. But I,
Probably.
as I say, the natural order has returned. Hibs are bottom of the table and Hearts are above them. Despite us being 11th, there's always something to laugh about, and we will continue to laugh at our neighbours. But yeah, I'll kind of draw that to a close. As I say, folks, let us know your thoughts on the derby, and are you happy? Are you disappointed with a point? Do you feel like we should have got some more than that? Or, like us, are you content to take a point in what has been a very, very busy and full on week for Hearts that has obviously seen us play 3 games back to back? But we look ahead now to tomorrow at time of recording, tomorrow night's fixture. At time of listening, if all goes to plan, it'll be this evening's fixture against Kilmarnock. Um, I don't know about you, but I think it'll be a very, very difficult game. I think probably one of Critchley's hardest games, if I'm being honest. I think Kilmarnock haven't had a great start to the season by the standards that they've set previously, but a Derek McInnes side is always going to be difficult to break down. And I think it'll be on Critchley to figure out how to do that. The lack of pace that I mentioned in the derby is something that concerns me, and it will concern me until it's addressed. Or if we start to see some players come back in that have got a bit of pace about them and deliver the goods, i.e., Vargas. That's the one concern that I have. But the positive in my head is we are at home. It is Tynecastle, back under the lights midweek. It should be a pretty decent turnout. I know it's midweek, and that's the frustrating point. But I feel like, as I said about earlier on about Critchley and his comments about this is our pitch, we play how we play. I think that will inspire the players to have a bit of confidence in themselves and believe that they can get a result. I do feel like if we get a result against Kilmarnock, that can kickstart us, hopefully, climbing up the table. And obviously, they'll have a few more days to prepare for that game than they did previously. They only had 1 day to prepare for the Hibs game, which I think is remarkable as well. Because obviously, you've got the downtime and the recovery, and then they've got to come
Yeah.
back in and figure out how they're going to play against Hibs. So there's been a little bit more of time for them ahead of tomorrow night's fixture. But how do you see it playing out?
Yeah, like you say, it is a bit of a concern because McInnes' side is very difficult to break down, just like you said. My concern is the same concern I've had the last couple of games, which is the tired legs. Like, do we have the energy left in the tank to go full pelt to press them hard enough? And do we have that finished article at the end? Like, do we have that final touch and the killer instinct in us? That's only going to deplete more and more with every game that we play in this run. So I feel like the tired legs are a pretty big concern for me. Can we beat them? Absolutely. Will we beat them? That's up to the players and the effort levels, and it's up to Critchley to kind of get that out of them, I suppose. This is probably, like you mentioned, it's going to be one of the most difficult tests so far for Critchley, and I think it's going to be a massive test for Critchley as a man manager, because if they do have tired legs, it's the motivation, it's the inspiration that gets you through. The comparison was made to George Burley by myself and by a couple others in the last week. Um, and that was what he got out of Hearts. You know, every game it was just like, keep it simple. This guy's shite, he's shite, they're shite. Go and batter a couple past them, and then we'll have a cup of tea in the second half. You know,
Yeah,
can he get that out of these players? Is the big question. Can Shanklin get his scoring boots? I feel like he's getting closer and closer. If he breaks out tomorrow night, it's game over, and we could potentially destroy them.
yeah,
We could end up humping them if Shanklin breaks out, because I feel like when he scores, he's going to start scoring in bunches like he did this time last year. We're just looking for that one sweet hit that goes in, and that's going to be
yeah,
him. He's going to be good to go. Um,
yeah.
if it comes tomorrow, brilliant. If it doesn't, we'll just have to find another way. It's going to be interesting to see how the lineup is constructed tomorrow. With that extra day to prepare, brilliant. But it's still the fourth game in like a week and a half, so
Yeah,
it's going to be a massive ask to get that sort of level of intensity out of them yet again, especially coming off of a derby, which, like I said, was quite a physical game of football.
oh,
Um,
completely, completely.
uh, what we have to look at, I think, from a mentality standpoint, is an enormous chance to gain ground. I'm just going to quickly check once again the league table here. So Kilmarnock are ninth, and we are sitting 11th, but we're only 3 points behind Kilmarnock. So we can even them on points with a win tomorrow night, and then all of a sudden you're well on your way to being out of that kind of bottom three.
Yeah,
So
exactly,
that's what we
exactly.
kind of have to, I think, look at it as a chance to gain ground, because essentially, like I said last week, our first and only priority at the moment should be getting out of that bottom six.
Yeah, completely. And then obviously, just a sort of quick look ahead again, obviously to the weekend's fixture as the games just come thick and fast. We've got St Johnstone on the weekend away from home. They currently occupy sixth place. Obviously, that may well change between now and Saturday on the game. But again, it's another game that I don't. I think it'll be a tough one because it's always a tricky place for us to go and play. But I'm kind of back to that sort of cautiously optimistic approach of I don't really fear anybody at the moment because I think the fact, and like I mentioned earlier on when we're speaking about Critchley and his build up and his system, etc., keeping it simple is working. And if we continue to do that, and with the rotation options that he's doing, I think Critchley has already worked out the players he can trust in this team and the ones that
Yeah.
he needs to be able to rotate. I think particularly the fullbacks seem to be the ones that get rotated most often. We've seen Kingsley come in for Penrice, we've seen Oyegoki come in for Forrester, and there's been that rotation because there needs to be, because he's asking his fullbacks to do a lot of work, but he trusts all of them to do that work. The one he doesn't seem to trust is Salazar, but that's another conversation for another day.
Quite
And
rightly, quite
yeah,
frankly, yeah,
yeah,
Salazar
he's
has
not.
not impressed me so far.
No, I'm
Neither what
with
we've
you.
seen from him on the pitch, and certainly not his attitude. His attitude
Yeah,
stinks for me. I would
I'm
leave
with
him
you.
I would leave him on the bus.
Yeah,
I
I'm with
don't
you.
feel like he should be playing for Hearts again because his
Yeah, I'm with
attitude's
you.
disgusting.
Yeah, completely. And it is what it is. And obviously he'll know, like I say, he'll know the players he can trust and the ones he can rely on to get us through this run of games. And then hopefully, like we say, things will settle down and we'll get back to having a few more days in between times for Critchley to really drill into these players what he wants and what he expects from them if they don't already know. But yeah, like I say, John, just before I wrap up this week's episode, do you want to give me a score prediction for Kilmarnock tomorrow night?
I'm gonna err on the side of optimism, and I'm gonna say that Shankland goes off, and I'm gonna say that we win 3-0.
Okay, that's even more optimistic than me. I'll put my positive hat on, and I'm going to go for a 2-0 win. I'm going to go for a 2-0 win for the Gorgie, and hopefully it'll see us climb the table and escape that bottom two that we've occupied for some time now. But yeah, as I say, we'll leave it there. And thank you as always to John for joining me this evening, and
Always a pleasure.
thank you to you for listening and watching, folks. And if you are heading to the game against Kilmarnock, enjoy it. And hopefully we see yet another step forward in the Critchley era. Before we go, again, like I said at the start, all of our social media links are down in the description. Please do feel free to head over there and tell us your thoughts on this episode and others. As I say, we're also on Spotify. Back catalogue of all our previous episodes can be found over there. So if that's where you get your podcasts fix from, please feel free to head over there and find us. But yeah, drop a subscription on the YouTube channel. We're making baby steps towards the next targets that we've set, so hopefully we can hit them as we go along. But yes, as I say, thank you very much for listening and watching, folks. And yeah, have a good one. Cheers for now.